in Metro Detroit, today marking 50 years since Jimmy Hoffa. 1982, Hoffa was meeting Detroit mob enforcer Anthony Tony Giacalone and New Jersey mobster Anthony Tone. So many theories about what happened to him. So tonight at 8 o'clock, we're going to debut a new documentary on Local 4 and Local 4 Plus, diving into all of these new theories. It's an hour-long special. Here's a sneak peek.
And as somebody who was able to have direct contact without raising suspicions of Jimmy Hoffa. And so, you know, this was a tight package and needed to be further looked at and investigated, and it simply wasn't.
It was on a wire. It was the first, and I think the only time that there was ever a discussion through a law enforcement undercover agent where that kind of information was available.
All right, so joining me now to talk about all of these theories that you're going to hear about and read over on clickondetroit.com, which, by the way, you can do by scanning a QR code there. Jeff Jewell, he is a photojournalist here at Local 4 and right now a producer. And we also have Scott Bernstein, who is a crime reporter. You spent much of your career following Jimmy Hoffa. You know all there is to know about this and some things that we still don't know, I would assume. What we just heard there was more about this FBI wiretap that's really coming more to light nowadays, but we still don't know the background and really who's on the tape, right?
No, we know who's on the tape.
We know who's on the tape.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you have to wait till the premiere of the backstory.
That's the tease I'm getting to here.
Yeah.
You're not going to know until 8 o'clock tonight.
But what we're getting into here with that clip was kind of just a discussion about why, where this information came from, right, and why it was maybe ignored.
Why it was kind of lie dormant for 32 years.
Can we answer that? Do you want to wait on that too?
Well, I mean, I think it isn't necessarily as bad as it looks. I know a lot of people are being.
Oh, you buried evidence, that kind of thing.
Yeah, why did the FBI sit on this? And just to defend them, the information was brought to me about 10, 15 years after it was brought to them, and I dismissed it.
Okay.
The person that we're naming as the killer was not somebody that became a focus of the investigation until 40 years into the probe. This is not a guy that is one of the quote-unquote usual suspects. There's been probably about a half dozen names since day one, back in the summer of '75, that have been put out as the top suspects, and this is not one of those people. So when he was caught on a wire back in the early '90s, admitting his role in the Hoffa kidnapping and murder, I think it was easy to dismiss it as somebody that was just bragging.
Sure.
Because that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah.
And then new developments over the last 10 to 12 years, new confidential informants of very high value, some new books written, or one book written by a Harvard law professor, and then my sourcing has put us towards this individual. And I know, again, hindsight's 20/20, and it might look like there was something missed back in '93, and maybe technically it was, but this was it looked at the time like a real shot in the dark, didn't seem at its face value to have a ton of validity.
Sure.
Over the years, over the next 20 years, it showed to have a lot of value. But at first, it didn't appear that it had value. It had value. It just didn't look that way.
And to be fair, there were many people bragging and claiming.
Yes, right, exactly. Right. That's to your point. That
yes.
This looked like it fell in line with a pattern of people that either did know and were lying, or people that didn't know and were trying to interject themselves into the narrative, either for financial gain or some type of infamy.
Sure.
So yes, you're right. He was victim of past bad actors.
Right. It's the opposite of Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Right.
Everybody was crying that they killed Jimmy Hoffa. I want to talk to you too, Jeff, because this documentary is I've seen parts of it. It's just fascinating and phenomenally produced. When you started working on this, did you realize and kind of recognize how big this was going to be, or was it just kind of like a side project that you were just kind of dipping your toe into for a little bit?
Yeah, it started as a side project. I just have always been fascinated by the case and the story. And so it just kind of started that way, but then things sort of built over the years of putting it together, and then of course was eventually connected to Scott, who kind of put some of these big pieces together for us and kind of, you know, forms the cornerstone of this. But yeah, mainly we were just trying to talk to people who, you know, were still alive, who had some connection to Hoffa and that milieu.
What was that like, talking to people who still have these connections and are still around right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's living history,
Yeah.
you know, and it's fascinating. And it's also fascinating because, again, a handful of the people that we talked to, you know, in the documentary are people who have not previously talked a lot to the media or shared their stories publicly.
Or at all.
And so that was really the main appeal for me. You know, we didn't set out to do a project that was, from our end, that was going to solve it. You know, I mean, that's his job, you know, to look into that. But we just wanted to kind of hear voices from people from that time and share their stories.
Yeah. And we had talked previously about, you know, some of our thoughts on why people are now sharing their theories. We were thinking that a lot of it's because either so much time has passed or so much of the retaliation that would come, those groups are no longer around, so maybe it's safer. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can speak for somebody that's a colleague of mine in my OG Media and Original Gangsters podcast, who's a part of a panel that I'm going around and staging a panel discussion about this. Novi Toko, former member of the Detroit Mafia, you know, he's kept his mouth shut for 50 years.
Forever, right.
And it really wasn't until he's later in his life, time has passed, most of the people that are, you know, that could be a danger to him are gone. And yeah, so enough time has passed where he feels like it's appropriate now to come forth and try to, you know, give answers. I think it's a half century old, but for some people, the people that lived it, the people that have to deal with it every day, it's still very fresh.
Right there.
And you can feel the anger and the bitterness and the sadness from his loved ones that we're sitting here 50 years later. And technically, we do have answers, but officially, we don't.
Right. Okay, we're going to talk more about the answers, the theories, and I want to talk more about Hoffa's family when we come back after a short break. Welcome back to Local 4 Live. Still here with our Local 4 photojournalist Jeff Jewell and crime reporter Scott Bernstein, who spent the past 50 years or so working on
Just
Jimmy
20,
Hoffa's.
you're aging me, 20 years.
I thought it'd be fun. Okay, so the documentary again airing at 8 o'clock tonight. Are we going to walk away from this? Don't spoil it for me, but am I going to know, or is this still more theories, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, we definitely, the capstone is, you know, Scott's presentation and new information. So, you know, yeah, I feel like yes, but hopefully also along the way, you just feel like you've gotten to know these people a little bit and spend some time with some very colorful characters.
Sometimes that's even more fun at this point, right?
Sure. I mean, I'm confident that I've identified Jimmy Hoffa's killer. After 50 years of speculation, I'm serving you up, the proverbial you, the audience that's watching Backstory, who come to our panel discussions. We're finally setting the record straight on who killed Jimmy Hoffa. And furthermore, we're telling people this is what the FBI believes.
Yeah.
This is the theory of the FBI.
That was my next question. I'm not discrediting you in any way, shape, or form, but what do the feds and the investigators say about your theory?
Well, they can't really, not really, they can't speak on an open and an active investigation. So their hands are tied in terms of, I speak to people that have been in the past involved in the investigation, people that are familiar with the investigation now. I've interviewed almost every retired FBI agent that's worked the case since 1975. And I can say definitively that in the last 10 to 12 years, the FBI has moved all of their focus in terms of who the killer is or was to this individual.
That will be named in Backstory?
Yeah, that was caught on the tape in the 90s, who we've sourced out from other people as being the killer.
Do you think investigators will ever come out and say, this is the killer? We have decided.
If they decide to shut the investigation down and call it a day and say that whether it's today, next year, 5 years, 10 years from now,
Yeah.
then I believe they will lay out, this is what we believe happened.
Okay.
And they would name this individual.
Okay.
But as long as it's an open and active investigation,
can't.
they're not going to say anything.
Yeah. You've been working on this for 20 years or so. You've also had an opportunity to talk to, relatives, loved ones of Hoffa himself. I'm curious, what is their perspective? How do they feel about all this? Because to the outsiders, we find this fascinating. Are they frustrated? Are they sick of the conversations?
The lack of closure, I think, is what's most painful to his children and grandchildren, and they want a gravesite that they can go visit.
Right.
And I think they are angry that we're sitting here 50 years later and you don't really have much of anything to show for it. Right. So I can sense that in listening to James P. Hoffa talk in recent days. It's not something that I think that they're through with or over or have come to terms with. I think this is something that's still very raw.
And do they get frustrated by all the conversations and all the theories and all the things that happen, or do they just want the FBI to do their investigation, or do they like the conversations?
Here's one take, and then I'll throw it over to Jeff. One of my takes was that they're not super interested in granulars. They blame a certain group of individuals who weren't the ones that pulled the trigger, and they don't care who pulled the trigger. Because in their mind, the person that pulled the trigger didn't have any issue with their father. The people that had an issue with their father were the people that contracted the man who killed him to do it.
Right, yeah. All right, so we're gonna watch this tonight. It's an hour long, right?
Yep.
How much fun has this been for you to work on this project?
Oh,
and what are our takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, it was a dream come true to get to do something like this. I mean, we got to construct it like a documentary. I think it has a kind of cinematic element to it a little bit. But to your question earlier for Scott too about kind of just that connection. He's talking about Hoffa's family, but I was fascinated. We were talking to Novi Toko, the mobster that Scott coordinated with us, former mobster. Who had...
You gotta put the caveat in there, don't you? Former mobster.
And, even his kind of emotion at the end, talking about, he has a part in our special where he talks about feeling kind of regretful about the way that the Hoffa situation was handled. He feels like it should have been handled differently. And there was a little bit even of emotion there, and it just made me realize, again, that connection is real for people that lived through it, and that was fascinating. We've spent all these years. I grew up with it as a punchline.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right.
And it was just fascinating to go through this process and realize that these are real people who knew him and have these feelings and still have these feelings. So that was interesting.
Novi comes from a part of the family, and it's a very fractured group now, 50 years removed. He comes from a slice that insists that if certain things would have been different, if certain people wouldn't have been in prison, that this wouldn't have happened. So that's why Jeff says that Novi feels like things should have been done differently.
Sure.
And if his uncle, if his grandfather were more involved in the decision making, it wouldn't have gone this way. Right. That's Novi's take.
Gosh, what a fascinating conversation, you guys. Okay, so an hour-long special, Backstory, the documentary airing tonight right here on Local 4 and streaming on Local 4 Plus. You do not want to miss it. Clear out your schedule. You have nothing going on from 8 to 9 o'clock tonight.